ROUVY Unchained.
Hello and welcome to ROUVY Unchained. I'm your host, Zach Nehr, and today we are joined by Matthias Heil, a professor of applied mathematics at the University of Manchester, who also happens to be an indoor ultra-endurance cyclist. We're going to hear a lot more about that very soon. Welcome to the show, Matthias. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me. Yeah.
So I wanted to start with your background as a professor before we get into the cycling
Oh
and everything
God.
with that. So how did you get into teaching and how did you eventually end up becoming a professor at the University of Manchester?
All right, interesting. That's a long story. I mean, I started sort of liked numerous things at school, I guess. And initially, when it came to choosing a course at university, I sort of was torn between physics and engineering, actually. So a long way, and not a huge way away from mathematics. But in the end, I decided to go for engineering. But we had this option at the university I was studying in Germany to go for sort of theoretical engineering, mechanics. And I always quite liked the theoretical end of it. And, after I'll cut out the bits in between. At some point, I ended up doing my PhD in mathematics. So I'm still a very applied mathematician. There's colleagues in my department who probably think I'm not really a mathematician anyway, but but they tolerate me. So that's how I ended up there. Yeah.
Have you always been kind of a math kind of person? I remember when I was growing up, math was always my favorite subject. And then for me personally, as I got into the really higher levels of it, it became super theoretical. And I was like, it doesn't even feel like numbers anymore. Is that something that you teach, that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm at the very much the applied end of things. So I'm really not a pure mathematician, and I mean, I quite like. I mean, I do like practical applications of things, fluid mechanics, solid mechanics, these kind of things. So depending on which country you end up in, I may very well, if I had stayed in Germany, for instance, I would probably have ended up in an engineering department. But so I like this sort of mixture between the practical applications, then doing some hard, clean maths. And computing things as well. That's an important thing for me as well. So it's the three things together interacting.
And with teaching, was that something that you felt like you were going to go into that for a long time? Or was it something where through your studies you kind of found kind of teaching or being a professor was kind of a career path for you?
Well, I mean, that's sort of it. You sort of stay in academia. You leave primary school and they think you're good enough to go to secondary school, and then at some point you find yourself being a professor. In some cases, so it sort of goes on. And if you stay in academia, there's this thing that 60% of your time you do teaching, 60% you do research. It does add up to more than 100. So it's sort of part of the job. But I mean, I love teaching. I think ultimately what got me into academia is that I like the subject. But I love to hear myself talk, right? So what's better than teaching?
Exactly, yeah. So you mentioned the timing there. So what is your schedule like as a professor, and how has that changed over the years?
Well, that's sort of it's. Don't think it's changed very much. I mean, the thing there's always this. Some people describe it as we're self-employed, but with a salary, which is a really lovely job to have. So, I mean, we are very flexible, right? I mean, there's always this thing when so there are quite a number of people who teach in schools and things in my family. And, when we compare notes, how much time we spend teaching, I don't get any sympathy from them whatsoever. It's very little because we do other things as well at the same time. So we typically teach something like 2 or 3 courses a year in Manchester. And, so if you look at the actual contact hours, it's not a huge amount of time that we spend. It's still important to get right, of course, and then there's exam marking and things like this. But it's what you tend to do is, I mean, the teaching always has to be done, right? I mean, that's you stand in front of students, they've paid fees. And the research is always the bit you squeeze into the free bits in the middle. So there's a lot of flexibility what you do, and you're sort of expected to find your own interesting problems to work on. Ideally, something that other people find interesting too. But so I quite like that aspect of it. But I mean, it's also the interaction with the students. That's both at PhD level and the undergraduate students. That's something that sort of keeps you honest.
So with the cycling, when did cycling start for you? Was that in Germany or was that later
Yeah.
on in life when you were already in the UK?
Oh, but actually, so it started sort of ironically. In secondary school, I was a bit obsessed with motorbikes, and so there was this, I think when you were 15 in Germany, you could ride a moped, and all my friends, I was the youngest in my class, and everybody got their moped, right? And at some point, my parents took me aside and sort of said, "We're not going to buy you one of these things, right? You do know this." And so I realized I was going to be the only one still riding my bike to school, which I found really depressing. And then I sort of thought, well, if I have to do it, I may as well do it properly. It was really sort of just a reaction to this. And I thought, I'll now start cycling properly, right? And I've never stopped really. So I've sort of kept going. When I was a student, I basically every summer before the exam started again, I would go down to the Alps for a couple of weeks. So then we go from the Großglockner down to the Col de la Bonnette. And so I've been up and down these mountains properly, long before ROUVY came along. And I mean, that was brilliant. And then, at some point I still used to cycle when I was up in Leeds for my PhD. And then, kids came along and other things mattered, right? I mean, it's just not that it stopped me from cycling. I always used to ride to work, which sort of kept me fit without even thinking about it. But I mean, the sort of, cycling just for the sake of cycling, that just stopped because other things seemed more important. And then once they started leaving the house, I all of a sudden it's sort of interesting. It wasn't a conscious decision, but I thought, well, there's still this bike in the garage. You don't just have to ride to work. And I started again. And so initially, as I said, the landscape up here is absolutely fantastic. So I'm in Manchester now. So the Peak District is just around the corner. And it's beautiful landscape, really highly recommend it to anybody who is thinking about where to go in the UK. Well, and then in, I think, 2018, ROUVY came along. And so that really changed my life. I've basically stopped cycling outside. I mean, I still ride to work and back. And all my other cycling happens in the garage. Very bizarre, but works for me.
That's great. So with your schedule of being so busy and all those years of all these different transitions and family and work and things going on, how have you fit cycling into that schedule? Was it something that was very intentional, like every day I'm going to try to ride an hour at this time, or was it just kind of fitting cycling around everything else? Like when you had time, you would jump on the bike and something like that.
I mean, in a sense, the nice thing was that the time when I sort of, drifted away from cycling just because family seemed more important, right? Again, not really a conscious decision. The thing I was aware of actually is that the daily commute to work, right? It sort of takes half an hour roughly. It's not a particularly nice ride, but it just gets me there, right? And it's my way of getting to work. So I have to be there, right? And it may be tipping it down outside. It was a sort of voluntary ride. You'd look out of the window and say, that doesn't look very good. I think I'd stay at home. But I have to get to work somehow, right? And taking the bus is horrendous, and my wife uses the car. So that's just what I do, right? And basically without even noticing, I mean, I was sort of aware of it. I had these 2 half-an-hour rides every day. And, while I wasn't quite as fit when I started again, I started with, looking back, quite short routes really, but I mean that sort of kept the basic fitness there, and at least I enjoyed cycling. So that was just my way of getting to work. And then later on, it's just sort of initially you grab the odd half an hour there, then I had a little route that took me an hour in the evening, and then you just start building it up, and it gets bigger and bigger. But I mean, to some extent, you always fit it around whatever you think is important. And so I just made time for it because I loved it.
This is something that I always wonder about with people that commute by bike, especially somewhere like the UK where like the weather could be anything. It's probably not
Yeah.
going to be great. And I would always wonder with being a professor and I assume you would dress up pretty nice for work. So then how do you manage the clothing, and is there a shower at work? Like if it's pouring rain and it's cold, like are you wearing your work clothes, the nicer clothes under like a layer of
Of course, the
of rain
disclaimer is
resistant
that I'm a
gear?
mathematician, right? Mathematicians don't dress up for work, but mathematicians also don't walk around in lycra. So I mean, it is true. I do cycle in, and then I change in something non-lycra, and yes, we do have showers and things, so that's not a problem. But
That's
I mean,
really
the thing
nice.
is, the logic is always, occasionally you bump into people when it's really been tipping it down. And I have to say, actually, the weather in England isn't as bad as people make it out. It's just much more changeable, right? I mean, on the continent, meaning in Germany, for instance, in summer you sort of get 3 weeks of nonstop sunshine, or longer. But you also get 3 weeks of nonstop rain in the autumn and winter, right? Because it's just more stable, right? Whereas here, everything changes nonstop. So there's a good chance you get a little bit wet on the way anyway. But, it changes very quickly, right? So, and sometimes when it's really tipping down, right, and people sort of think this is not cycling weather, and people ask me, "My God, did you cycle in today?" Well, the thing is, given that I don't have the car and I don't want to take the car anyway, the alternative would be to take the bus. By the time I've walked to the bus stop, I'm just as wet as I would be on the bike, and then I'm standing there shivering, and I have to be in the bus with the smelly people. So cycling is, even for that, is much better. You change to something dry when you're there, and so it's not a problem really.
And what was it about ROUVY and indoor training that drew you to it so much? And you mentioned 2018? Was that about the time when you started consistently getting on ROUVY and getting on the indoor trainer?
That's right. I mean, don't quite know what started it. I think over Christmas, we visited my parents, usually, and they have this old, really, I mean, whatever the opposite of a smart trainer is, one of these things with a belt and you have a screw to tighten.
The
And it was
dumb
just
trainer,
terrible, but
yeah.
it was the only thing that resembled a bike in their house, and absolutely hated it. I know there's no resistance, no response to anything, and I just used this thing. And then around this time, I was sort of became aware of things like Swift and others, and started looking into it. And so I decided, spent a long time sort of, Googling these things and reading what people made of it. And in the end, my wife just said, just buy the bloody thing. So I did. And then as far as the apps are concerned, I looked, I was sort of pretty convinced that I'd end up with Swift, right? Because that's what everybody seemed to use. So I tried out a few things and sort of deliberately left Swift to the end. You have your 2-week free periods or whatever. So I tried a couple and, wasn't particularly stuck. And then there was this ROUVY thing that I'd heard of before. And I tried it, was absolutely blown away. I never actually made it to Swift. And, maybe I won't tell you why I'm not so sad about it anyway. You may have to cut this out, but I mean, ROUVY was just perfect for me. It's sort of this strange combination of, I mean, it's the real routes, right? And many of them I've cycled myself, right? Especially in the Alps, you sort of recognize these things and remember things. And the realism is sort of, it's a really strange thing. May tell you something about my gullible brain. Occasionally I have these things when I come back in from the garage and I sort of walk past my wife and say, "This was so beautiful." And she goes, "You've just been in the garage." And it's true, I'm fully aware of it. So, I mean, the way I tend to describe it is, you're doing this yourself, right? And I think most people who've used ROUVY before will probably have similar experiences. When I'm sitting on the sofa and watching, something on telly, or I'm in the cinema, I'm fully aware at any moment that I'm sitting in the cinema, or I'm sitting on the sofa, right? And nevertheless, if it's a really scary movie, you are genuinely scared. And I mean, ROUVY is precisely like this, right? I mean, I am fully aware that I'm watching this thing on an iPad, and there's fans around me. I'm in the garage. It's not the real thing, but nevertheless, the sort of physical feedback that you get from the resistance changing and all this, it does seem completely real to me, in the same sense as how watching a movie captures you. So it's that's probably the best way to describe it. So I was just stuck with it really, and really never looked back.
Yeah, the immersion on ROUVY is so cool. Where
Yeah,
like you said, I'll do some rides and then I'll finish up and then go shower and then I'll go talk to my wife or family and I'll just be like, "Oh yeah, I rode in Sri Lanka today or I rode in Girona today." It's like, well, I guess I was just on the indoor trainer looking at a screen, but
that's right.
yeah. So I've heard about these races that you do, and I heard there might be a secret move that you do in these races. Are these races on ROUVY?
Oh yeah, that's right. Everything's on ROUVY. I mean, I mean, that's not quite true. I didn't do much proper racing. I spent a year in Dublin when I was a student, and just to get to know people, I joined their cycling club. So they did races as well. And so I got a proper license, and I think I did 3 or 4 races in my entire life. And it was sort of thrilling to fly away with a pack, and in really high speed and drafting. And I mean, it was fantastic, right? Just like a ROUVY race, but it's just so dangerous. I mean, I basically, and I did these 4 races and really enjoyed it and survived. I had one crash and saw many others. And then I went back to Germany. I sort of thought I could have joined the local club or do something like this. But I just decided, let's not. This is just, it's just too dangerous. So I didn't. And then ROUVY comes along. And, I mean, one of the first things I noticed is there were all these races on. And it's absolutely fascinating. So I started. There's Peter's Tuesday race, which Peter Goerman from Belgium. He been running these things. I think he's done more than 400 now. He's counting them. And so every Tuesday he sets up a race, and that's the first thing I started. And you it's the usual thing. You meet the same people every time you race, and then you meet them in other races. You organize things together, so it's brilliant. So I spend a lot of time doing racing now, and do the fake commute and the ROUVY racing and the Muckers races and all this. It's absolutely brilliant. But I'm all right as a racer. I mean, mainly I enjoy it. Right, I'm somewhere in midfield, and you're sort of surrounded by the same people every time. It doesn't matter, I'm not ever going to win a race. Or if I am, then, it's clearly the wrong race. So you finish somewhere in midfield, but it's always the same people you're racing, right? And one day it's you who wins the sprint. Someday it's somebody else. So, I mean, that's the exciting thing. So my party piece and all these things is basically I do my sprint at the beginning, not at the end. So I think starts in online racing tend to be much faster anyway. And for some reason, I mean, I'm a sort of decent sprinter towards the end. The trouble is, in many races, especially if there's not that many people, there's nobody to sprint against, right? You just roll over the line by yourself. And I mean, but again, this makes it sound more like a conscious decision. I just like to really hammer it from the word go. And then once I realized that I typically, because I do that to excess, I typically end up in front of the bunch for, a couple of seconds at least. So I thought that was quite amusing. And then it sort of become really, that's just what I do, right? And people know this. So no matter what the race is, even with the Muckers race on a Thursday where, all the really fast guys turn up, I will absolutely hammer it for a maximum. I mean, 30 seconds is as much as I can keep up. And it's completely anaerobic, right? I mean, it stops being anaerobic when you reach 30 seconds. But it's absolutely brilliant. So I get my glory. So I've got a special button on the iPad. And so the game is always, the race starts, I absolutely hammer it. I have to wait until the lag sort of disappears. The nearby list, I'm leading for a couple of seconds already. And there's still lots of avatars in front of me. So I have to wait until this goes. And then I take a screenshot of the empty road ahead of me. And then I can sit up for a bit. And then after, so I mean, lots of people who I occasionally get these comments on Strava afterwards saying, this is really insane. You're never going to make a break when you do it that early in the race. And all this, take me aside, give me strategy hints. And I said, it's a joke. I'm fully aware of this. But I mean, the nice thing is you can hang on to the fast guys for a little bit, depending on the profile. But so that's my sprint at the start. And then if there's anybody around to sprint against at the end, I'll give it a go too. And it's typically, I mean, again, I don't think it uses up many matches either. So typically the WhatsApp produced at the beginning or the WhatsApp produced at the end. So I survive. But it's mainly
great.
a joke, really. Yeah.
I love that strategy. And I love the comments on Strava and other things like that. It reminds me of some sessions I'll be doing heat training on my indoor trainer, and then I'll get comments on the live chat being like, "Oh man, you look like you're overheating. You should take your jacket off." And I'm like, "Well, you got to read the title and like it's a whole thing. This is what I'm trying to do." But I think that's so interesting, your strategy for the races and sprinting at the beginning as a joke, and then the contrast to that are these massive indoor training rides that you've done. So I know there's a long list of them. I don't even know where to start to ask about these, but I mean, some of the rides I've seen, the numbers don't even look real. I just have so many questions about how long some of these rides take and what is the nutrition strategy like and the sleep and all that stuff.
I mean, it sort of started with, I mean, again, it sort of just starts to escalate, right? So, I mean, in terms of long distance things, so again, this was probably still at school. So one of my first big rides was from the middle of Germany near Frankfurt, which is where I grew up. I decided I was going to cycle all the way to the tip of Denmark because that seemed like a nice little landmark, right? So I cycled up there, and so with luggage and all this, and did sort of 100 kilometers a day or something, and a bit more. And then at one point, as I was about, I don't know exactly where it was, but it was raining the entire day. It was up in Denmark already. I was nearly at the tip. Raining the entire day, but it was summer, right? So it was nice and warm. And I had the tailwind, out of paradise. So it is blowing. I've never had anything like this before. So I basically just reached the point where I wanted to go into the youth hostel for the night, but it was so early and the youth hostel wasn't open and it was tipping it down. So that I'll just keep going until the next one, right? Because the wind couldn't be better. So that day I did 210 kilometers in the real world. And I mean, it was easy because, really easy because the wind was blowing me along, right? And I sort of realized, and for many, many, decades really, that was true. I thought, that was such a fluke. I will never better that really. And, so then after the kids had gone away and I'd started riding my bike again locally, outside properly, whatever, you start riding further and further and further. And then at some point I had this crazy idea. That's always where the trouble starts, with having a crazy idea. I hate birthdays and I hate getting all these phone calls for my birthday. So I like to hide out of the house on my birthday. So I decided I was going to, just occurred to me, I was going to write my birthday. And the recipe for that is you take the day, month, and you put the decimal point between the 2 months. So I'm born on the 24th of August. So that gives you 240.8 as a number, and you write that in kilometers on that day. So that's
Wow.
Write Your Birthday. And there's a Strava group for it with 3 people. Others are welcome to join us. So I've done that for a couple of years. And so that naturally then got me above the 210. Once I actually came back and thought I can better this, because I cycled around the block here, a bigger block, not just a local block, and pushed it up to 250. And I sort of thought, okay, that'll never be bettered, right? I mean, that'll just stay. I'll keep doing this, Write Your Birthday thing every year, but I will not get it past 250. And then this indoor cycling thing started, right? And, you meet all these nutters out there, and, you meet people who do really properly long distance rides out there, and they're also on ROUVY. And, you sort of realize you have a similar sense of humor. And so Nick Mandoki is to blame really for this. So he's in Australia, in Perth, and he did all these really massive long distance rides, including Paris. What is it? Paris, the 1,200 kilometer monster. And so we stumbled. So he's in ROUVY as well, and we stumbled across this at some point, probably 2019 or something. ROUVY had a challenge where you had to ride 180 kilometers in a month, or something like this. So we just said, we can do this in a day. So that's actually the first one where we sort of really just went for it, right? And then we found a couple of people who thought that was amusing too, and sort of built it up step by step, really. And, in the early days of ROUVY, there weren't really many routes that length, right? I mean, this particular one wasn't very well done, but it had 180 kilometers. I think it's disappeared now. And then afterwards, there's people like Bernd Eller and, lots of really amazing recordings for ROUVY, Graham Love in New Zealand. So all these long distance things sort of started appearing, and, you just start doing them. And it seemed like, why do we do it? I don't know. It seems like a crazy idea that just appears. and then you think, surely you can do this. So you send an email or leave Strava comments for a couple of people saying, I'm planning to do this, and then we'll see who turns up. But it's really just, it always starts with a silly idea. Look, there's this new route here. Can we do this? And then the answer is, of course we can. And then we do it.
Yeah, is this something where how long is there typically between the idea pops into your head and you actually do the ride? Is it something where you don't give yourself too much time to overthink it, or is it like you give yourself maybe a week or two to kind of prepare for it?
That's an interesting one. It's there's usually a fair amount of time. There's, for starters, there's the moment when you sort of think, oh my God, am I even good? So here's the most recent one I did. I turned 60 recently. And so with a half a year to go, roughly, I can't quite remember, but, I was on my bike, and suddenly this idiotic thing appeared in my head, which was 600 at 60. That was just such a beautiful ride title, right? So I thought, I'll do this, right? But I was, at the same time, I was a little bit nervous about it. So before I told anybody, but I started ramping things up again, right? I've done other long distance rides. And there's this thing of not overthinking it, of course, because that is sort of, it's easily said, once you've done a few of these, that becomes easier, right? You don't agonize over it, you just do it. But nevertheless, you sort of ramp it up a little bit. And then, once you've done a couple of, quite decent length rides, so the half distance I always say is is what one should go for. And then if you do this distance, you can always keep going for the homeward leg, right? That's the sort of mindset I tend to have with these things. So that one started, and I think, let's say half a year before my birthday, and I sort of had this idea, and I sort of started. There wasn't really a training plan or anything, but you sort of have a feeling, maybe I should start doing 300-kilometer rides by that time, and you get there step by step, and but I mean, in terms of planning, it's sort of all informal, right? Because it's not a real. It's just a crazy idea. So even if you don't end up doing it, it's not a big disaster. Of course, I always do it, but yeah. And then at some point, when you feel reasonably secure about it, then you tell people about it, and then you're committed, of course. So the worry then is, oh my God, what happens if I catch a cold just the week before or something like this, or in summer, what if it's boiling hot on that day? So luckily, so far, it's been all right. I've never been caught out like that.
Yeah, and how long did that ride take? Was that the longest one that you've ever done, the
I've
600
done a little bit.
kilometers?
I mean, in fact, that's an interesting one. I think the longest one is actually the what is it called? The Red Bull time lapse, I think they call them. So that's a couple of years ago, and they have the. So I mean, this is my sense of humor, right? So Red Bull organized this thing. They do it. It's a 24-hour race. So it's it's the time, not the distance, and it's basically so they have the real world thing on a race course somewhere. They actually haven't done it for a couple of years now, but it used. There's one or two before the one I did. They book a race course, for motor racing or whatnot, and they just put the cyclists on there, and you just keep going. And there's all kinds of permutations. You can do it in teams, take turns and all this. And then the one I did, they also had the virtual racing, right? So you get 24 hours, and you have to upload it via you register your Strava account, and that's where they pull this thing off. So anyway, it's a 24-hour race, and the person with the longest distance wins. And of course, so here's the my sense of humor thing. Of course, they held it on the day when the clocks went back, so you actually get an extra hour.
Oh.
So it's actually a 25-hour race, and that was something like, I think, 624 something. I can't remember, over 600
Wow.
anyway. And the really amazing thing is, I just remember that actually so because people upload, so you can go to their webpage and seeing where you're doing in your competition, but because the information is only pulled in via Strava, the league table, I mean, it's sort of a running league table, right? You can see where people are, but they will only know once somebody uploads something, right? So if somebody does the entire ride in one go, then there's only one Strava upload, so you never quite know where you are, right? Not that it makes a difference, because it's not a race. But anyway, I turned up, and final upload, and the time was definitely up, and I check it, and there was a guy, can't remember his name, but he beat me, in inverted commas, by 0.1 miles. So it's the small, the last digit that they display. There are two digits behind the decimal point, and we were not aware of each other. He did it all on Swift. He did one upload at the very end. So it's basically the length of my garden or something like that. I'm not sure how big the garden is, but it's not a huge distance, right? 160 meters over
Wow.
25 hours. Amazing. So, I mean,
That
I
is
was sort of,
amazing.
was I gutted? No, I was just amused.
Wow.
So
So
that's the sort of, 24 hours, sort of 600. So the 660, it turned out so there's one ride on ROUVY at the moment that is 600 kilometers, one of Graham Love's one, and he sort of does 3 loops in New Zealand. And it's sorry, Graham, it's a really terrible route. And you do it 3 times, and it absolutely does your head in. So I'd done that once before, and I said, I'm not using that route. So we just patched together 2 separate 300-kilometer ones. And so did a restart. I started at 7 in the morning. So, I mean, again, I invited people to it. And then scheduled the second one to start at 7 in the evening. So that gave me 12 hours for the first one without having to sprint. And I think I sort of had an hour between the two, and then did the second half. So that, it's 2 300 ones for that one. So, 24 hours, 600 kilometers is sort of roughly what people like me can do. There's others who can do more.
wow, those are crazy rides. So I'm curious about the logistics for these. So are you like in a 12-hour block and a 24-hour block? How many times are you getting off the bike, whether it's to use the restroom or grab a snack or even like take a 10, 20-minute nap, anything like that? I assume it's at least a few times in that long of
Yeah.
a span?
I mean, it's sort of interesting. So nap, no, not at all. In fact, I nearly I would have liked the 600-kilometer route. I mean, if you split it up into smaller sections, then the trouble is, if you want to ride with others, you have to commit to this. I mean, you're setting them up as races, right? Inverted commas, right? I mean, just because I didn't want I mean, ROUVY allows these group rides, but I mean, that means people can just move themselves around. I didn't like that. So it had to be, I decided it had to be a race, and then you're committed to a certain time. And then you sort of have to judge it right. I mean, you don't want to sprint for the start of the next leg, but you also don't want to unnecessarily sit there for a long time. And then the interesting thing was with the 600 one, I was actually really nervous about this. You can of course stop at some point, right? And and just get off the bike and do something, stretch, or even have a shower. I sent an email to ROUVY and asked them, can I just double check how long does it take before the race times me out? Especially if I'm the last
Mhm.
person riding, because they had changed all kinds of things. When you used to be able to re-enter a race at an arbitrary time, even after it stopped. And I was certainly aware that that wasn't possible anymore, right? I mean, once you're out, you're out, and they, they upload the results to Strava and you can't restart again. So I realized if I'm the last person riding and I take a shower and I come back and it turns out it's uploaded everything to Strava and that's it, that would be a little bit annoying. So I was a bit anxious for, taking too many breaks of that time in between. And generally, I just like riding really. So there's sort of natural breaks when there's a long downhill bit, right? I mean, that's definitely easy. So you get off the bike and the bike rides by itself. One of the many advantages of doing it indoors, you just get up and stretch and do whatever you need to do. And other than that, big breaks, I mean, having a shower halfway through was definitely that, oh, lovely. You just feel like a new person, right? And then you restart. But yeah, no big planned breaks really. I mean, there's the odd bit. I mean, you do get off the bike when you can, when it's rolling downhill, but it sort of comes naturally. I mean, idea for me personally, the 600-kilometer loop is better than whatever 600-kilometer bits that you sort of patch together, because it gives you more flexibility, really.
Wow, and what is your nutrition like for an effort like this? I can imagine you're probably not having many gels because that would just be way too many for way too long, I imagine. Is there more solid food? Is there more, like, sugar in your bottles, that kinda thing?
I mean, to be honest, I don't do gels anyway. I'm really low tech when it comes to this. So what I usually have, I mean, for any, if I want, so I thought at the end of the day, what you need is sugar, right? So I get a 2-liter bottle of Fanta. I mean, whatever. I've got a bottle of water. I've got some other drink there, a ginger ale or something like this, just something with flavor. And then I have Fanta. And if I need the sugar, that's what I use. I mean, that's basically for sort of shorter races up to 2 hours or something. And then for anything longer than that, the what I tend to eat is rice pudding, because
Oh,
it's
interesting.
rice pudding with a bit of jam stirred in. And it's lovely because you can sort of slurp it. It's there's not much chewing involved. It's still it's something more solid than just liquid. And then for the really long rides, my wife is a superstar cook, and she makes the best mushroom risotto in the universe. Because I mean, as you say,
Ooh.
after a while, I mean, everything I've mentioned so far is after a while you're just sick and tired of all this sweet stuff, and you just need something else, right? And then what do you eat? Because the sugar is good, but it's just you can't take it anymore. So mushroom risotto is wonderful. Alcohol-free beer is also really good. I switched to that at some point. So I think, yeah, I'm swigging beer, but yeah, alcohol-free. I've never
Is
tried
that
with alcohol.
you're saying during the ride, alcohol-free beer?
Yeah,
Oh,
just
wow,
when
I've
it.
never tried that before.
I mean,
I'll
it's
do
just
that,
like
like, outside of riding, but
it's just I had the anticipation of needing something different. I just put some in the fridge, and there's a fridge in the garage, right? And I just put some in. I wasn't quite sure, what I'd feel like when I'm finally really sick and tired of all the sweet stuff. And at some point, oh God, I want to drink something else. And yes, there's this beer, and I tried it. Lovely. I mean, it certainly it's something different, right? So it helps in that sense.
Yeah, that's something that I've definitely noticed with some of the huge rides that I've done, like 6, 7 hours where,
Yeah,
like, normally, I'll never eat bacon. Like, on a regular day, I would never really crave that. But
yeah,
after one of those, like, 7-hour rides, a giant bacon cheeseburger, I'm like,
yeah,
"That
yeah.
sounds like the best thing in the world."
That's right. Yeah.
And with these long rides, where where do you go psychologically? Is it something that I imagine it's not steady the whole time because it's just so long. I mean, you're going through an entire day, sometimes, I mean, 24 hours. I mean, it's way more than like a normal
Mm.
just waking day. So, is that something that you've noticed that are there times when you have to really push through? Are there times where you just lose the motivation and you just have to find something else to keep you going?
I mean, it's strange. The motivation is never really a problem, and I don't quite know why, right? I mean, I think it's actually I had lots of discussions with Nick Mondoku, I mentioned earlier. I mean, he's done all these massive rides outside, and we sort of have whenever one of us does these, there's this debate restarts, which is harder, inside and outside, and we're both so modest that we always say it's the other way around, right? And I genuinely think that indoors is a lot easier for all the reasons that I've mentioned. You know, that there's you can have a shower, you can have drinks anytime. You know, it's just next to you, really, right? I mean, outdoors, it's just there's the elements, there's rough roads and all this, there's punctures and whatnot. It's the and I think, I mean, I've never really discussed this indirectly. I think what he means indoors being hard is the sort of possibly the psychological element that you can get off any time and go to bed. And you know, once you're out there in the real world, you know, you have to get back home anyway, right? So you may as well keep going. But for me, that's never. For me, it's real enough that I mean, physically, I realize my bed is just, you know, a few seconds away. But that's not how it works. I'm doing this right? So for me, that never appears, right? I'm doing this right, and that's it. So in this sense, motivation is just I'm riding, and then it's true. 24 hours. I mean, even 8 hours or whatever is a long time. And in a sense, it's sort of interesting. You get one element I sort of like watching myself is that you when you do a shorter ride, right? I mean, or even a race, right? You go through a really rough patch, and if you only do a short ride, I mean, whatever, let's say a 1 hour race, and you're feeling really rotten, then the entire race is written off. Whereas if you do these long rides, it's sort of I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. You know, 2 hour rough times, sort of it's just part of the game, right? You get your brain to say, "Oh God, I'm feeling really absolutely terrible," and you know it's not getting better. But you've only done an hour of that. It doesn't really matter, you know. It's you'll be fine in an hour's time. So it's sort of I don't know how you get your brain to believe these kind of stories, but it comes easy to me, right? And it's true. Whatever. After a while, you sort of realize, you know, you check the time, and oh look, it's lunchtime. Actually, I'm feeling all right now. So you've sort of somehow sat through the 2 hours of feeling absolutely miserable, and you sort of get used to this, right? I mean, I think there's an element of this. What is it? The 10,000 hours they say, you know, with anything you do. Once you've done enough of it, you've experienced it all, and it just becomes routine to some extent. And I think that that's sort
Yeah,
of part of the experience, really. I mean, I still remember when I did the first really long rides, and you know, the first time we did an Everesting on ROUVY. I mean, I was getting really properly nervous in the run up to this, right? I mean, can I do it? And I mean, again, you know, you can get off, of course, right? That's always an option. It's not such a big deal, but it seemed there seemed to be real nervous apprehension. You know, the day before, you sort of really think, can't we start now? You know, I'm sick and tired of all this waiting, and I'm too nervous. And then sadly, I'm sort of missing that nearly because I know I can do it. I mean, that thrill is gone really, right? Because it's I've done too much of the 10,000 hours. Maybe I've done 10,000 hours. I don't know. But you know, you get used to these things.
yeah. Is this something that I'm curious from your perspective with that level of experience? Maybe this will be a harder question, but for someone who has never done something like this before, but they
Yeah.
have the ambition to do something like this, do you have any pieces of advice for them for getting into this and trying to push through those hard moments? Because for someone who's never done it before, they don't know
Yeah.
what's on the other side because they've never been there before. Whereas someone like you, you've done it so many times that it's nothing new.
Yeah, I mean, you build it up in steps. That's the thing, really. I mean, it's sort of in a sense, it's interesting. You know, after the kids left and I started cycling again. I mean, I can check this on Strava. My first routes were it's a 1 hour loop around the landscape around here. It's all pretty flattened, and if you stay away from that, and that's how I started, right? I mean, I had done lots of cycling before, but that was my base state, right? And you just and then at some point on the weekend, I then so this is a 30-kilometer ride. And then on weekends, I do a 40-kilometer one, and I was really proud of myself, right? And then you just, whatever you do, 60-kilometer rides, and you build it up. And I mean, you don't. Well, I certainly don't. I didn't sit up one day and decided I was going to ride 600 kilometers indoors. And if somebody wants to do that, then I don't know what to tell them. Good luck. But I mean, it's just sort of it's step by step, right? I mean, I always enjoy the element of trying to do something that at the moment seems totally insane, right? I mean, this as I said, when we started this on ROUVY, there was this 180-kilometer challenge, and we thought it was hilarious to try to do this in one day, right? And it was really, that was one of those. We had decided on the day, and I was properly nervous about it, and we pulled it off, and I was properly knackered afterwards. But at the time, that seemed a big thing, and then you build it from there, right? Take it step by step. There's always something else insane on the other side, but I mean, you get used to it step by step.
Yeah, yeah, I love that level of experience that you have with this is something that's so unique. Even though cycling is such a huge global sport, there's so few people that have done kind of these rides that you've done, especially on an indoor trainer. So, I've heard something about you and pickle juice. Is this something that you've used on these long rides before?
Right. I mean, it's that's sort of another standing joke, like these starting a race with a sprint. The other thing is I'm not getting any commission from the pickle juice manufacturers, but so I don't suffer from cramps very often. Actually, I haven't had any for a long time. But I mean, especially in summer when you're really sweating, it does sort of build up, especially on these long rides. And I came across this the interweb being full of crazy things. Somebody said use pickle juice, and I thought this is disgusting. And then at some point I just I think I had really bad cramps, and again there's this fridge in the garage, and I knew there were pickles in there. I'm so desperate, I'll just try that, right? And I opened the pickle jar, just took a sip, and and yes, it is disgusting, and it works instant. I mean, so here's the thing, right? There's no science behind it, and I then got really intrigued. I googled more, right? And I think it is generally understood that there is no scientific explanation for it, right? Nobody knows really. All I can say is, honestly, I'm not trying to to get you into trouble, but try it once. I mean, if you're suffering from cramp, you don't quite know how to handle it. One sip of that stuff, just straight down the hatch. Um, it's sort of interesting. I mean, the only explanation I've read, and again, there's no real scientific substance behind it. The fact that it works more or less instantaneously nearly suggests it's not some physiological process. It diffuses into your whatever it does. It doesn't go through the digestive system. It probably really is just the shocking the system precisely because it is so disgusting that jerks you out of your crampiness. I don't know how it works. All I can say, it works for me. So if you're listening to this and you suffer from cramps and you don't know what to do, just give it a go. It may not work for you, but it's worth trying. It's my magic.
That's so interesting. It's one of those things where, like, even though there might not be the studies, there might not be the science, like, if it works, it works. Like, just go with it.
Absolutely. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. What's
So
wrong with a placebo? Yeah. It's like
yeah. I have one last question for you. I'm curious
sure.
about this with these long rides. Is there anything in particular that you listen to, like any kind of music, or are you like watching TV or movies or anything like that?
No, I have a second. There's a retired iPad next to it. So I have, there's the iPad that I write off, and then there's another iPad on the side. So there's always something on. So I remember the one particularly amusing one was when the Tour de France was on. Of course, I'd watch the Tour de France on the other iPad, and I would occasionally get out of the saddle to attack a climb that was on the wrong iPad. Because it was so that causes confusion. But I mean, generally it's YouTube and things. I mean, especially for these long rides, you want a 3-hour Frank Zappa concert or something like this. And I mean, there's so much stuff out there. So generally it's YouTube, some crazy music. The longer the better. I mean, often there's sort of a backlog of recorded seminars that I'm supposed to watch. So if can't do this during a race, but sometimes my brain is working well enough that I just watch some of these during the early stages of a longer ride. But yeah, there's always an iPad there. And during the long ride, sometimes I just switch it off and I enjoy the peace and quiet. It just depends what your brain wants, but generally music. Yeah,
That is so interesting. I love that contrast between like watching a lecture versus music versus just having nothing. It's like,
yeah,
well, if my brain is going really well, I can like really pay attention to something and like take it all in. And then
yeah,
after like 6 hours of riding, I'm just like, I have no thoughts anymore. Just I'm just
that's
gonna
right.
stare at the screen and pedal, and that's it. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Matthias. It was
Not a
great to
problem.
have you on.
Yes, thank you.
And where can people follow along and learn more about you? Is Strava the main one for you?
Strava is basically that's my. I don't do any social media, so Strava is my social media. So yes, that's where it all happens. And join the races. They're really good.
Awesome. I definitely will. What are there particular days or times for those?
All right. So I mean, we have this regular. So the ROUVY racing series where we do two races a week in winter and one in summer. So that's Wednesdays and Saturdays, and there's sort of four slots for different time zones, and there's a league going. So and there's some properly fast people in there. I feel it's a privilege to race with them. I wouldn't see them if you raced in the real world. But so that's a regular one. And then the other thing that is sort of a regular one, there's the fake commute that I invented when COVID started. Because I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I used to always ride to work, and that kept me fit, right? So when we suddenly were told we couldn't go to work anymore, I thought I'd really be missing this. And ROUVY, I was already on ROUVY at the time, so I decided. So I remember Tuesday the university shut down, and I took all my kit home. And on Wednesday, as a laugh, I thought I'll have a fake commute on Ruvie. So 7 o'clock is when I usually set off from here. So I arranged a race at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's been going ever since. So every time I work from home, like today, 7 o'clock UK time, there's a fake commute, sort of half an hour, all hammers out a proper race, and then we go to our desks and do proper work there. So that's the other thing you may want to join if you're into that sort of thing.
That is super cool. I love that. Well, that's all from this episode of ROUVY Unchained. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Matthias for joining us. See you next time.
Good, thank you. Bye.